everyone, and welcome back to my tank. Back in January I posted a video about what types of foods I feed my corals and how I feed them. Today I wanted to expand on that information and show you the types of foods that I feed my fish and how I feed my fish, because I think that I kind of do it a little bit differently than everyone else. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you that today. So I generally only feed two kinds of food. Frozen, which you see at the top, or pellets down at the bottom. The type of frozen I get comes in the little blister packs. I keep it in this Tupperware container in my freezer. I usually feed a variety between the bloodworms, spirulina brine, and mysis shrimp. And I sort of just rotate that depending on how I'm feeling and what I've fed to my fish last. And then for pellets, I have the Ocean Nutrition, Hikari Marine S, and then this new wild goji food that I am trying out. I have in the past tried to feed flake food, but for me, I feel like it's really messy and I just don't care for it much. Again, I think I sort of feed a little bit differently than everyone else, so maybe that's part of why I didn't like the flakes. So let me show you how I feed now that I've given you a basic idea of what I feed. I'm just going to use two of the foods today. The two that I like the best right now are these Marine S pellets and the wild goji pellets. So I'm going to feed this to the Lagoon Tank, and I'll use this one in my smaller tank. I do not generally measure out the food as I'm feeding it. If I'm using the frozen food, I will just use 1 cube and I will use that between the two tanks. But for when I'm using pellet food, I just sort of take a guess. For the wild goji pellets, it's a little bit hard to get it out of the container and into the little jars I use, so I do use a scoop, and I do like a scoop or two. I know that I'm just gonna feed the Lagoon Tank with this, so I'm just gonna do 1 scoop. And then because this Hikari is actually in a little sample pack, all I do is shake some out until I'm satisfied with how much is in there. This is just gonna be for 1 fish, so I'm not gonna do too many. The next step will be that I do add a little bit of water with the syringe and I swish it around. I personally like to have the pellets sink right away because I kind of sit and watch my fish eat. And this is the big difference I think that there is between me and other people, because the way I've seen other people do it is they just kind of squirt their food or drop their food in and let the fish go at it. So I'm gonna add some water and I'll feed my fish. So starting with this tank, I have added a little bit of tank water to my jar, swished it around so that the pellets are all wet and sinking, and then I draw some up with the syringe and I just sort of carefully drop pellet by pellet. Try to get her over here because I really don't want to waste too much of the food. Especially because I'm also right now low on snails. Unfortunately, the last snail order I made didn't make it, and that was right before winter. This little guy was coming up for some food too. Okay, dude. So yeah. I really don't like to just put food in and let it circulate around. I just think that's really wasteful. Moving on to the Lagoon Tank, once again, pumps off, lid off, added some water here to the food. This food is a little bit bigger pieces, so I have a bigger syringe. But the same idea applies. I will draw the food up and drop it in just bit by bit, making sure that my fish have a chance to get the food before it sinks completely, before squirting more food in. I will occasionally put some food over my Duncan so that anything they miss, the Duncan eats. Make sure I give some to my shrimp. And then in this tank especially, because I do have a couple larger LPS corals, I have 2 large plate corals, I'll make sure they get some of the food as well. They're a little off to the screen. And in both tanks, when I do feed both fish and corals at the same time, I make sure that I pay attention to my fish first, that they seem to be mostly fed and happy before moving on to my corals, because otherwise the clownfish tend to be a little bit more aggressive and they will pull food out of corals' open mouths. So that is how I feed the fish in my tanks. The foods that I use, the technique that I use. Like I said, I feel like it's a little bit different from other people. If you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I will be happy to answer any and all questions relating to the foods I feed, how I feed my fish, or other questions you guys have regarding my tanks. I really appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time.